everything rises and falls on leadership, but there's a next level to that. Everything really rises and falls on ethical leadership.
Leadership integrity has reached a critical inflection point. Across corporate boardrooms, government, healthcare, academia, the church, and NGOs, leaders are under mounting pressure and something is breaking.
I think cynicism is the one that plays out most graphically. But underlying cynicism is a deeper, more painful word in the culture, a disappointment with leaders.
We expect leaders to operate on a higher level. So what happens when trust erodes and failure starts to feel normal?
They were the product, how did he put it, not of madness, but of moral choice.
Is this just another moment in history? Or are we crossing a line that can't be undone? In this inaugural episode, Frederick Russell, executive leadership coach and principal of True North Leadership Group, is interviewed to set the foundation for the conversations ahead, exploring integrity, accountability, and the moral choices leaders face under pressure.
Can we reverse it?
This is the True North Leadership Podcast.
We're here for the inaugural episode of the True North Leadership Podcast. And today's topic is the integrity gap, why leadership is failing us. But before we delve into that topic, you're my father, and I've been able to observe you over my entire life. And I've seen you as a highly effective leader. I've seen you interact with a really broad spectrum of leaders as well. And I've seen you passionate about developing and working with leaders. Can you talk a little bit more about what drives your interest in leaders and leadership?
I'm not really sure where it came from. All I know is that over the spectrum of my life, I've always had a genuine respect for leaders and leadership. And one of the things, it may sound a bit hackneyed, is that everything rises and falls on leadership. And that is a truism, is non-debatable, but there's a next level to that, is that everything really rises and falls on ethical leadership. And that becomes the pivot point for all of that.
Can you define ethical leadership? Like what does that look like?
Ethical leadership is a leader that is honest, that is truthful, that has character, that is reflective of what they purport to have on the inside is what is reflected on the outside. That these are people who have an internal compass that points true north. In fact, that comes from Stephen Covey's book that I read 25 years ago called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Oldie, but it's a goodie still. And one of the things he talks about is that every leader has an internal compass, and that internal compass must always point true north. Thus also the title of the podcast.
Okay, I was gonna ask that. That makes sense. True North Leadership.
Yes.
I think we can all recount, moral or ethical failures from leaders that we witnessed over time. Is this a new phenomenon, or have we, are there things in the recent or historical past that have kind of pointed to this slide, this de-evolution of ethics and leadership?
I think it's been coming all along. There's in every era, you're going to find ethical leadership and non-ethical leadership. I think it has intensified in the last 20 or so years of where we are seeing more cases that show up in the leadership arena of leaders who act against their best interests and the best interests of the organizations as well.
Well, what are some of the examples that we would have all have recognized? Some public examples in the last 20 or so years, or things that you might have more recently?
Let me go back really early. I was in the 4th grade when the Watergate hearings were on. This captured the focus of the entire country.
People have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
And this is when I think the nation got introduced on a large scale to the ethical lapses that were happening in government. And it captured, again, the attention of the nation. That was so huge at that point. But that almost seems to be the launch point where we begin to, as the public, to recognize and acknowledge that sometimes leaders crash and burn when they violate the ethics of their responsibilities.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that as an example because you went to that as a part of your formative years. It stood out to you. You were aware, even as a fourth grader, as a 9 or 10-year-old, that fourth grade is 9 years old.
Fourth grade is 9 years old,
Something
right?
like that, right.
Right.
You were aware of what failures and integrity looked like on a large stage, and for me, at the same age was. Around the same age, I was a little bit older, was when the Clinton Lewinsky scandal was extremely public.
It constituted a critical lapse in judgment and a personal failure on my part, for which I am solely and completely responsible.
I also remember at the time being highly aware, extremely aware of what it looked like to see distrust by the masses in leadership. All of a sudden we realized that we were being lied to, and we saw like that slow, gradual, slide. And cynicism, I think, started to take root around that time. Do you feel now that cynicism is key, is highly present in the way that people interact with their leaders in any given context or environment?
That's a good word. I think cynicism is the one that plays out most graphically, the word cynicism. But underlying cynicism is a deeper, more painful word in the culture, a disappointment with leaders, because you expect leaders to operate on a higher level. And I think that's created not a dichotomy, but a merging of some difficult feelings in the culture right now. Can we trust those who lead us? And when they fail, there's a disappointment. We may not give it, express it in those terms, but that is the underlying feeling I think that is resident in the culture right now.
And so I use the term cynicism. You did as well. Use the term disappointment by those who are being led. What are the practical? What are the impacts that we see on the people once leadership fails, especially with an ethical or moral or integrity failure?
Well, let's start there at cynicism. That means is that the confidence is not there in leadership. There's a low expectation. There is no sense that we can see something better. We know that eventually it's probably going to crash. It's the same thing over and over again. And so that has a disparaging feel in the culture of what do we have here? Can we have any confidence and any anticipation that things will get better? I think it's the overarching saga that's developing and is becoming, unfortunately, normal in the culture, which is more dangerous as we go forward as a nation and as a world.
Well, if it's becoming normal in the culture, can we reverse it?
I don't know if I can say we can reverse it in totality across the culture. I think you can begin to chip away at it by growing ethical leaders and having those in positions who model what it looks like to be leaders of character, leaders of integrity, honest leaders. I think one by one. But in totality, I don't see that happening.
So how does a leader get to the place where they find themselves making unethical decisions that affect the people, that affect the organization, the institution?
Yeah, that's the $5 million question. How does a leader get to that place? Well, I saw something that was illustrative of this by watching a movie a couple of days ago called Nuremberg. Nuremberg were the trials that were held at the end of World War II when 22 members of the German High Command were hauled before a world court to try them for the evils that they had committed against society. Well, prior to the trials taking place, while they were warming up for this and getting ready, they brought in a U.S. Psychologist named Kelly. Dr. Douglas Kelly was his name. There were two things that he was asked to assess out of those 22 prisoners of the German High Command. Were they mentally competent to stand trial? But a third, more deeper assessment he was trying to make is, what brought them to the place? Prior to them making these dastardly decisions, what brought them to the place to even make a decision like that? Well, Hess had some assumptions that he was operating on.
I have one right now. I think we imagine a sociopath. All of these people were sociopaths, therefore, like, they're going to do these things.
And that's what Dr. Kelly discovered. His assumptions was that they will be sociopath, pathological, evil men. But he got thrown a curve. He discovered that they were brilliant, that they were normal, that they were sane, that there was nothing extraordinary about them in anything with evil. But yet it disturbed him even more, because how is it that very normal people can come to the place to make a decision like that? And one of the things he discovered is that these men were sane, that they did atrocities, but they were the product, how did he put it, not of madness, but of moral choice. Try it again. They were products not of madness, but of moral choice. And then I saw a quote after the movie that I was looking up some research on the movie even further. And the quote went like this: if you give people the opportunity to make bad decisions, it won't be long before some of them do. Wow. In other words, they don't have to make the bad decision, but some of them will cross that line. And you can't explain it because most people and most leaders who cross the ethical line, where their integrity comes into question, these are very normal people until that moment where they cross the line. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason, then they make the fundamental decision to do it.
Yeah, I think we've seen that. We've seen it often, even from childhood. A child might be given access to a cookie jar, and you tell the child not to eat the cookie in the cookie jar, and give it a long enough exposure to the cookie jar. Inevitably, I think the child might take that cookie. We see it in workplaces where, given unfettered access to privileged information, or without direct supervision, sometimes people will make the decision that's the lowest common denominator, which clarifies the point that leaders are setting the tone for what morality and ethics look like in the workplace. How would you counsel leaders to learn to recognize what a slippery slope is on the horizon, or how to avoid creeping compromise, how to learn to make good, wise, ethical decisions?
Well, first of all, and this is a blinding glimpse of the obvious, you cannot learn how to do that in the point of impact, in the moment of pressure. A leader has to settle early in their life, in their career, of what the contours of ethics will be for them. That I will not lie, that I will not try to destroy people out of some pathological need to exert power, that I will have the requisite character to keep me through those moments when I'm challenged with the potential of compromise. Again, that has to be determined and settled early in one's mind, and refuses to cross that line that will only lead to the heartbreak and the organizational impact, negative organizational impact that that will come about as a result of that.
Yeah. I heard you the other day reference I think it was a John Steinbeck quote or an excerpt or something about like a gradual slide.
Oh yeah, well, it was actually to Ernest Hemingway.
Ernest Hemingway, okay.
That Ernest Hemingway was talking to a man who had gone bankrupt. And he was inquisitive enough to ask him, well, how did you go bankrupt? And the response was instructive. He says, gradually and then suddenly. And that is the same path when it comes to crossing the ethical lines. It happens gradually out of the smaller decisions, and then suddenly you're there, you're in the midst of it, and now it has become normal for you, as opposed to having to warm up to it.
I mentioned earlier that I've seen you work with a bunch of different types of leaders across corporate environments, academic environments, the church, NGOs, like all of these things. Have you recognized that a lot of the challenges in ethical leadership are the same across these sectors?
Well, it doesn't matter. Leadership is leadership, whether it's corporate, academic, healthcare, government, NGOs, or even the faith community. Leadership faces the same different contexts, but the same challenges and the same temptations of crossing ethical lines is resident there as across all platforms on that.
So, given that those things, there are through lines, no matter where the leaders may be leading, what are some of the things that a leader, whoever they are, wherever they are, might need in their leadership toolkit, their ethical toolkit, to make sure that they can be prepared for leading in a moral way?
Yeah. I have, for me, and with my work with leaders, and not only training leaders, but as an executive coach, I've arrived at about three things that a leader needs to have in their toolkit. Number one, there's got to be what I referenced at the top, and a solid internal moral compass, where it is directed at true north. That again, the leader has settled how they're going to operate, how they're going to live out their leadership when it comes to morality and ethics and integrity. That's number one, settling in their mind about where the compass is going to be turned towards. But number two, the ability to have accountability, people who hold them accountable, people who can tell them when they're right, people who can tell them when they're wrong. And you can't have fans on this. You got to have people who love you but are not impressed by you, who can speak deeply into your life, and you carry the requisite humility to receive that. Because no man or woman is an island. No man or woman stands alone. And when you try to navigate the high wires of leadership, and you don't have anyone around you that holds you accountable, your ability to crash and burn is greater because you're trying to navigate it by yourself. I think a third one will be that you got to have a place that you can get centered or recentered or level set. And I think all of us need that place of centering. For me as a Christian, it is my relationship with Jesus Christ. For others, it may just be getting out into nature. Others, it may be reading. For others still, it may be meditating. But a place where you can get centered. Let me use this term again. You can level set on a continuous basis to make sure that that life and your leadership is working in a way that's not going to be problematic for you as you lead.
I think if I can presume to append one more thing, I think humility might be, the 3B or number 4, because as you are seeking accountability, you do have to be open enough to receive that direct but constructive criticism as well. Humility seems like it would be key in the same vein.
Well, and because of our proclivity to be egotistical, no matter who we are, that is important.
I'm the most humble person you know.
Well, humbly speaking, absolutely. But a prima donna would never submit to this. Humility is antithetical to who they are, and so you're right. If there's a fourth one, it will be that the ability to possess humility, and humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is not thinking of yourself at all. You got to take the id and the ego out of it, because if that lurks, it will always have some way to meander its way into your life and your leadership that causes the problems that so many have faced.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I mean, this has been an excellent conversation. I am excited to see more of the conversations that you'll be having with this podcast with leaders who are leading in a highly effective way, who are good in their fields, who can give direct feedback and conversation about what makes and creates and breeds stronger, highly ethical, moral leaders in this environment. It's something that we need as well. Thank you.
You're very welcome. This has been a great launch, but we'll go further in the months to come of delving into this deeper with people we'll be interviewing who are on the front line, folk who have crossed the line and those who have stayed on the other side of the line. Below will be instructive for all of us as we grow in our leadership coming out of this podcast.